Ghostwriting. One of you asked about ghostwriting, and is it common? Is it something that I've done? Do I get people to ghostwrite for me? And what do I feel about it? I think first what we need to establish is what defines ghostwriting versus what is expected of us as media composers. According to the dictionary, a ghostwriter is a person whose job it is to write material for someone else who is the named author. The difficulty is, of course, we don't actually write music these days. Now, I think what we're probably talking about is paying someone else to do our job and taking the credit for it. And I guess we need to define what our job is, really. I'm just going to break off for a moment because a couple of you raised a couple of questions after my Logic Pro Tools monologue, whether I used both kind of DAWs in isolation, so did stuff in Logic and then kind of put it together in Pro Tools. The answer to that is no, I actually have them synchronized. What I love about this is it's like you've got the kind of Sauron up there being, you know, your boss, the picture, and then down here is your piddly little mini heartbeats, as I called them. So if I actually pull this in so that we can see both DAWs in action, and what I'm going to do is show you how I synchronize. So it's 09, 59, 40 is the absolute beginning of this episode of Trauma. And then what I'm going to do is pull up MIDI synchronization, transmit MTC, and it's basically out of an IAC driver. Now, I didn't set this up, so you may have to research this further. And then I just make sure that Pro Tools is in sync mode, and then just hit play, and then there we go. There's a couple more reasons why I use Pro Tools. It handles multiple reels, which is really important for film. Whilst I know that Reaper can do all of this stuff, what it can't do is deliver itself to a dub in a format that they can import in a couple of clicks into their Pro Tools session. So there's a guy called Frank Gehry, and he designed the Disney concert hall in LA. Did he build it with his own hands? No. Was he there doing its entire construction? No. Did he create the engineering plans, budget for the materials, create the computer mock-ups? No. Did he even suggest that it be adorned with stainless steel? No. The Disneys, who were paying for the concert hall, liked what he had done with the Guggenheim in Bilbao, so they asked him to do more of that. Frank Gehry was basically copying Temp, but what he had done was design an art gallery in northern Spain which completely changed the city. His sketches looked rushed and not much like what it ended up being, but it was delivered on budget and on time courtesy of systems he created and a team that he put together. And back to the Disney Hall in LA, if Gehry hadn't designed the Guggenheim, would the Disney Hall look the way it does today? Of course not. Was Frank Gehry the architect of both of these schemes? Fuck yes. When I go to music colleges that teach media composition, I always conduct a straw poll, and I'm always staggered at how few hands go up when I ask the simple question, who here has heard of a HOD, HOD, or head of department? Because so little of what we do to create a film score is actually composition. Now, effectively, we're sonic architects who are there to create and direct a department of which we're head. The makeup of a film score can be broken down into a number of assets or facets. And I don't know of a film score that I've done, even back in the dark ages when I was beginning, where I didn't employ at least one person to do one of these many jobs that make up, creating a film score. Even I think the first point is difficult to define. It's really like the heart of being a film composer. Is that writing a hummable tune? Well, hum me the theme to American Beauty. You can't. But the minute you hear it, you totally associate it and recognise it. You'll also notice that I've put putting music to picture quite far down on this list, because some composers don't even do this. And I'm talking about like world life-changing, Oscar-winning, amazing scores where the composer simply doesn't put the music to the picture. And there are many, many examples of this. So at what point is the score being ghostwritten? At point 1 or 2, or do you have to satisfy some more of these facets to qualify a fully unghostwritten score? How many? 9 out of 26, or at least over half? From what I've experienced with the composing community, I think that there tends to be a self-policing that is fair. Most people will get you the credit where it's due and will assign rights that are fair and appropriate. If they're a bit out of order, you tend to get kind of jotted down in a, he's done me a good favour book, and the phone will ring further down the line. Sometimes the less fair conditions are down to circumstance. I mean, an example would be I was writing a film score and my first baby came 2 weeks earlier than expected. So I had to get Ben Foskett to write a title sequence, and I still had one more theme that I hadn't written, which Paul Thompson thankfully took up alongside about 8 cues. They both attended the sessions, I didn't, and I'll be forever grateful for that. Sometimes the timescale will be so short that you'll have no option but to get a bigger crew on board. Sometimes they may attach your name to a project in order to get funding. I mean, I don't think my name kind of carries much metal in that respect, but I've seen often someone's name being attached to a movie, and then when they actually get round to sending them a fine cut, they've moved on to another project, so they need to call in the cavalry too. And sometimes, especially with kind of rescue packages, they're just after your kind of house style. You'll often get that thing of, whoever you get to do this, that doesn't matter, but can I tell the financiers that it's definitely you who's doing it? The definition of composition in the eyes of the law is if the work didn't exist before you played it or before you sung it, then you composed it. Have I ghostwritten for Hollywood scores? I would say no. Have I collaborated on Hollywood scores? Yes. We'd get a very specific form of direction from fellow composers. Would those cues have sounded the same if that composer hadn't been involved? And the answer is no. Therefore, I'm not the sole composer, I'm not the ghostwriter. So my opinion on ghostwriting, I think you'll find it within this story, which also answers the question of whether I've ever ghostwritten myself, and I have definitely once. It was a co-pro, which means co-production. In this case, it was Britain and one of the smallest countries in Europe. They'd kind of divvied up the heads of departments. You have to do kind of like a passport count to be eligible for certain tax breaks. So the DOP was a Brit, the editor was a Brit. They shot some of it in this small country, but they decided in their wisdom to go for a composer who was based in that country. The score was DOA, really. So I was called in as the cavalry, but the deal was that he was going to get credited, even though every single note of the score was written, produced by myself and recorded in Britain. The producers were very thankful to me for not taking the credit. I was afforded my rights and was given a good fee, and from that I did get put into the little favour book, and the phone rang and I got a film out of it. Now that film was a creepy, pervy little thing that disappeared without a trace. I got paid fuck all. It took months and months and months. So a raging narcissist directing it who wanted the entire score to be played sul ponticella, to use his term. Yes, that did happen. Basically, if I look back to both of those projects, the one I think more fondly of is the one that I ghostwrote. I think if there's anything positive to be taken out of this question of ghostwriting and the examples you can draw from it, is that on the day that there's a huge knock on your door and behind it is a massive, gargantuan job, for God's sake, ask for some help. Don't do what I and hundreds of other media composers do, is let the spirit of the auteur take you over and drive you into an early grave.